Hi everyone. We're here today chatting with musician Kaeley Pruitt-Hamm about the release of her new music video called Damn Damn. Emmy Action met Kaeley more than 2 years ago when she released her album High from Pillows, which she had recorded after contracting Lyme disease, which then triggered her to develop myalgic encephalomyelitis, ME. At the time of the recording, Kaeley was severely ill. She was barely able to lift her head off the pillow, but was eventually able to record an entire album. At the time, over the course of several conversations with Kaeley, she inspired Emmy Action to launch a virtual art and music concert called Bedfest to showcase the artistic talent of the Emmy community and also to explore the experience of having Emmy through poetry, art, and music. As part of the Bedfest Festival, Kaeley re-released a music video called Believe Her that features photos of people with Emmy holding up images of themselves with a sign that says "Believe Me." Bedfest was a powerful Bedfest was a powerful moment that continues to live on through our Facebook group and webpage. So we're going to dive in now and catch up with Kaeley about what's been happening since the release of her music video, Believe Her, and the Bedfest Festival that happened 2 years ago. But before we do that, I just want to play a quick clip from her music video so you can see what that was all about. So I'm going to share my screen. And okay. Okay, so you can see how powerful that is. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There we go. Um, let's see, I'm going to get back. So, sorry, I'm just going to go back to the video here. Okay, so Kaeley, it's been a few years since you released the Believe Her video and since Bedfest. You've thankfully had some improvements in your health and were able to take that video on the road. And I understand that you've had some powerful reactions to the video. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
And I don't know if the audio is working for the Believe Her clip. Maybe it was working on your end, but
Oh
um,
no.
people got
Okay.
to see the selfies.
Okay, so people saw the selfies. You'll have to go and if you just go to YouTube and you type in Believe Her music video, Kaeley Pruitt-Hamm, it should come up.
Yes. Um, so I actually just got back yesterday from one tour stop as part of a tour that I'm doing right now for my latest album, the Canary Collective. And I changed my artist name, so I'm actually now KPH and the Canary Collective. And so at different tour stops along the way, I was just in Seattle. We've been showing the Believe Her music video. And in the last couple of years, I also have been sometimes continuing as a guest workshop leader for a job that I used to have before I got sick in training young high school and college students in how to be a community organizer and organize strategic nonviolent movements for social change. And so the last couple of years, I've shown that video as an example of ways that people can unite all around the world to make a point and not only feel less alone in the struggle, but hopefully change some hearts and minds, especially the decision makers. And it's been really amazing to have the feedback continue from kind of different groups. I think of it as like three separate groups, but they're Venn diagrams overlapping. One group, it's awesome to hear from people who have never heard about myalgic encephalomyelitis or people who are able-bodied, but want to be allies who are really changed by seeing the video and seeing so many people who have been bedridden from this disease. And often those people are people who know me and my struggle, but it has actually helped me to have a lot of people in my life see that I am not an anomaly. I am a part of an epidemic of people all around the world. And then another group of people that I've seen it impact is people who do understand very much what it's like to be bedridden. And so I've connected with a lot of people around the world reaching out to me online and saying that it meant a lot to hear the song and feel empowered and less alone. And when I perform the song live, I give a shout out always to the people who were part of the music video. And then the third group I hope that it impacts is decision makers. My old job before I got sick was working in DC for a social justice lobbying firm. And so I used to work right across from the Senate offices, and I always think about the people who are making decisions about who gets health care and how we regulate insurance companies and how we regulate housing rights for tenants and all of that. And the people who are making the decisions need to definitely hear from us. And so I sent that video to a couple people online too. I think there's a lot of a propensity for doing video lobbying and virtual lobbying. If we're too sick to go out in the streets, we can still share our stories. And I paired the Believe Her music video with a video that I made where I'm interviewing some of my friends who have Lyme disease or terminal illness who were saved by the Affordable Care Act. And that got sent around to a lot of different legislative aides in the Senate offices. And I heard back from a lot of people that during the discussion 2 years ago around the ACA, that it was very helpful to have everybody's stories shared in a, right in your face way through the selfies. So thank you everybody who submitted your pictures and were brave and courageous to share your faces. And it's not been in vain. I carry your hearts with me. And we also, the last tour stop in Seattle, there were lots of tears, but I'm doing a tour in kind of a different way where I'm not packing it in with lots of, today LA, the next day Portland, the next day DC, the next day Paris. I'm definitely not doing that. I have had a lot of improvements in my health, but I still have to really pace myself. So actually, I just launched the tour in September, and I haven't been well enough to really go on tour until just this September. But we're doing house shows so that we can include people who are sick and make sure to curate the space so that we can make sure it's wheelchair accessible. And dealing with like traditional music venues and bars, it's a little bit more difficult to curate and facilitate so that people with different needs can attend. And we've also been live streaming the show so that people who are unable to get out can view. So the Canary Collective is out there. It's on Patreon for patrons for now, and then it'll be out to the public in February. And I'm really excited to share it because it includes Jen Brea's voice and many other canaries, people with chronic illness.
That's great. Yeah, tell us. It's wonderful to hear the impact of the Believe Her video. It's really inspiring. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about the Canary Collective album and sort of what it's all about for those who are going go and look out for it. You can go to her Patreon page if you want to support Kaeley and see the video and also look out for it in February as well.
Yeah, I have a policy for anybody who is sick with ME or any kind of chronic illness and you're unable to afford the album, please just reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook. Just Google KPH and the Canary Collective and you'll find me and just tell me and I will send you a copy of the album because the goal of the album is partially to feel like I'm sharing solidarity with people who I know what it feels like to be feeling really stuck, and it's always good medicine to me to hear other people's stories and remember that I'm not alone, but it's really easy to forget every day. I feel like I have to remind myself, and it's especially hard to remind myself when I was not really getting off the couch or the bed. So the Canary Collective, I got a grant to make through this organization in King County in Seattle area where I was living, being cared for by my parents for a couple of years. And their goal is to provide cultural services for underrepresented voices and in King County and beyond. And the cultural service I applied for the grant and said that I would provide is an album of music featuring many different voices of people who are struggling to afford healthcare, and and then also a series of events that highlight those voices live in person and then are recorded and shared and live streamed for people who are unable to attend in person. And the goal is to help people feel less alone in the chronic illness community, as well as encourage dialogue among everyone in society, able-bodied and not, to talk more about bias in healthcare, as Jen Brea has done an amazing job with her TED Talk talking about, and also the ties between human and environmental struggles that are going on with some ties to some chronic illnesses being perhaps related to some of the environmental issues that are happening on our planet. And so I got the grant a year and a half ago, and at the time I was still pretty sick, and I tried to record, but then life happened, and my environmental illness, my mast cell activation and chemical sensitivity and mold illness became so severe that I had to start living in a minivan, in the back of my parents' minivan. And I actually decided to move to Southern California this time last year, based on someone who came to one of my shows when I was performing in Seattle, and she is another canary. She has chronic fatigue syndrome, and she said, "Have you considered that mold might be a big factor in kind of suppressing your system? Because I'm thinking about for the winter going down south." And she like came up to
Kaeley,
me
where
after
were you? Where were you living at the time?
Seattle, that when I was
Seattle,
performing.
right? Okay,
So
so like
oh,
sort of mold territory, right? Like with all the
wet.
dampness.
Yes, yes. So there are a lot of people who are pretty sick from mold, potentially in Seattle, and or sick from other things, but our systems get weighed down, by mold. And so that was just another connection because I played Believe Her song, and it resonated with these women in the audience, and then they came up to me afterwards, and it's just I'm I'm always, whenever I share a song, I'm kind of have like seller's remorse, like when you sell a house and you're like, maybe I shouldn't have. Like I have remorse about sharing my story sometimes because I'm
That's
like,
interesting.
oh, that was awkward, and like maybe I shouldn't have made, I said too much and I'm making this about me, and like, but then I'm always proven wrong. Like by the end of the show, there's always at least one person who comes up and says, me too. There's always one person who says, like, I have been disbelieved by doctors for so long, or even someone who, you know, gives me an insight into what I can do. And that makes it all worth it. And so in this case, it completely changed my life to meet this woman, Ren, who she's also a singer-songwriter with chronic fatigue syndrome from Seattle. And we both decided to move south. My doctor encouraged me as well, my Lyme literate doctor. And I tried, like, I experimented with the van because just as Jen also experimented with different climates and sleeping in tents. And it was amazing the difference that I felt when I started sleeping in a van, and I would wake up breathing the fresh air, and for the first time in years
Hmm.
I woke up and my stomach was like calm, and
Oh,
my sinuses were calm, and I didn't
that's
feel like
incredible.
I didn't feel like I had to sleep for another 5 hours.
Yeah.
um
So did you drive the van down from your parents' house, or did you have to buy a new one that hadn't
I
been like sort of tainted by the environment?
Yeah, I did end up buying a new one that's a Ram ProMaster high roof with plans um revamp it and deck it out with non-toxic materials and insulation. And I tried for 2 months and I kept on experimenting with sleeping in there, and I would have terrible, terrible chemical sensitivity reactions of insomnia, and like my eyes would basically, if I like closed my eyes, I would feel like there was a strobe light disco party
Mm.
going on. Like the brain inflammation was bad.
Wow.
The chemical off-gassing of, it was a used one, and there were too many chemicals in the cargo van. So then I sold that and I just ended up using the 2004 minivan that was totally imperfect, but I just slept with the windows open, and just that amount of difference was,
Hmm.
it wasn't ideal. Like a lot of people really focus on trying to create a really ideal environment when they're doing mold avoidance, but I didn't, I wasn't that strict, and I
Hmm.
still felt amazing differences.
Wow, that's
And
amazing.
yeah,
That's wonderful to hear.
yeah. And so then I actually spent a couple nights on San Juan Island, and that's a whole other story, but I had magical rendezvous with orca whales from shore, which was like my dream come true. Literally, I've had a recurring dream that that would happen um, since I was 5, and it's never happened. And I've always tried to make it happen. And I was like, I'm forcing myself to drive where like I hadn't driven in 5 years, and I like forced myself to drive the hour and a half there, and then like was like sleeping in my van and waking up and going to the beach and then seeing these orca whales breach, and I was like, okay, I'm on this path. It's the right.
Oh,
So it's been a magical year. I moved to Southern California, and I at first thought I was going to move to Ojai, but then the fires, if there was any dip in air quality with fires, which are going on right now in LA again, I would be unable to talk. My throat would swell, my tongue would swell, and Ren, my friend who told me to move south, came to visit me in Ojai last year, November 4th. And we were both like unable to talk to each other because our throats were so, we were like, our eyelids, were drooping. And so we woke up the next morning and we were like, this is ridiculous. Like we want to hang out with each other. And she was sleeping in tents. She had been sleeping in a tent outside her parents' house. And we looked at each other and we were like, let's go to Joshua Tree. We like just had a feeling, and we researched, and that was the closest place with clean air quality. And so we
and for
forced
people
ourselves.
who don't know, Joshua Tree is in the desert. it's in a desert region in southern United States.
Yeah, it is a really wacky place. I thought that Joshua Tree was just one tree. I had never been to a desert climate in my life. But it's multiple trees. It's a national park and it has a little town next to it. And so we drove there and I moved to Joshua Tree for I ended up buying a trailer that was made with non-toxic materials and mold resistant that was built for someone with ME
Hmm.
and chemical sensitivity and Lyme.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, and I ended up going into that trailer. And anyway, this is a really long story, but probably people are interested because we're all desperate for answers.
Yeah, I think people are always interested in mold avoidance stories and how that works out. I know it can be tricky. Um, well, I also want to ask you about so you're talking about Joshua Tree, and it is a really beautiful place, sort of like golden sand and rocks and this beautiful blue sky, and then these little Joshua trees that are sort of knobby at the end. So you actually set your music video "Damn Damn" there, which you released on October 4th on YouTube. So for anyone who hasn't seen the video, it's called "Damn Damn," DAM DAM, and I still have the images in my head. And so I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that music video and sort of the production and inspiration for it. And I'll link to it at the end of this article so people can see. But yeah, go ahead, Kaeley.
Thanks. So Damn Damn is the first single off the album, The Canary Collective. And I think I started talking about my whole van debacle because I was trying to explain that the recording process of this album has been quite the journey because my life has been quite the journey. But I am, the album's finally done, and Damn Damn was the first music video and the first single that I released out of it, and it's kind of one of the main anthems and themes of the album. And it comes after, in the album version, there are interludes that feature spoken word and clips from TED Talks and quotes and speeches from powerful women and queer and gender nonconforming people who have chronic illness. And Jen Brea's quote is like the first one that you hear, and it's leading up and introducing Damn Damn, the song. And it's a quote that basically, I'm misquoting her, but to paraphrase, she says, when I first started getting sick, I found that I'm a part of a cohort of women whose bodies are falling apart in their late 20s. And what's striking is how the similarities of how hard it is to be taken seriously in doctors' offices, and citing that, woman with a friend with a brain tumor that was misdiagnosed for years as anxiety, and all kinds of doctors saying, I don't see anything wrong in your body, so, take a Tylenol and go home. And this song, Damn Damn, I wrote after I finally found a doctor who said, how about you try this specific combination of antibiotics that treat Lyme disease in the biofilm form. And there are lots of ways that people disagree about treating Lyme disease or if we should or whatever, but I had this neck pain in the back of my neck and the base of my skull that was searing pain it was relentless for 4 years, from September 5th, 2014, when I was 25, and I got a bug bite in the back of my neck, and my lymph nodes swelled, and I had night sweats, and I was vomiting, and everything. And I went into the doctor, and they were like, well, we don't know, and tested me for Lyme disease, and the blood test is less than 50% accurate, so got a false negative. And so for months, I was trying to solve this neck pain and it would not go away. And then finally went to a Lyme literate doctor who is, of course, like $750 for an appointment. So I had to fundraise like heck to get that appointment. And then finally, I took these antibiotics, and within like 2 days, my neck pain went away finally. And
Wow.
so I wrote this song right after I just got my neck back. And it felt like a dam was breaking
Huh.
open, letting loose the flow back from my head to my toes. And I felt so much validation and anger at
Hmm.
how many months and years were wasted of me trying to figure out this pain, because I went to doctors and they were doubting that there could be an infectious component to what's going on. And they were just
Hmm.
saying, try holding your pencil differently, try getting a different pillow and
Right.
sleeping on it. Like, no, this does not feel musculoskeletal,
Yeah.
And it could be, I know that Jen has had some like success with treating the cerebral spinal fluid, kind of the compression in the neck, and that can be one of the puzzle pieces to why a lot of us have the neuroinflammation. But that the music video for Damn Damn is a bunch of other people who have Lyme and chronic fatigue syndrome and Crohn's disease, and we're dancing in the desert amongst the Joshua trees on a full moon in August. And Panda Landa is the videographer and the director and the choreographer for the music video, and they did an amazing job. I'm really excited that it's
Yeah.
out.
So I didn't realize that the other dancers in the video also have chronic illness. That's really interesting.
Yeah, some of them.
Some of them. Okay. Wow. Well, thank you for telling that backstory. That makes the video even more powerful in my mind. So I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about just when we talked about High from Pillows, your first album a couple of years ago. You had just talked about, the idea of wanting to use music and art to be able to sort of viscerally connect to people who don't understand chronic illness. I know that you've also been able to actually like directly use your video for activism as well. But yeah, just tell me a little bit about like why you think art is powerful for and music, especially for sort of reaching out to people and this sort of activism.
I think that I may have told this story before a couple years ago when we were talking, but it's worth saying again that I was really inspired by one of my best friends who is able-bodied, um, from college, who worked for a research program at University of Washington that researches a special rare disease in which the immune system has something going on that people don't quite understand why the immune system is doing what it is doing. And it's showing up in a lot of young people. And she said this doctor was the guy who founded the whole program and got millions of dollars for research and really spearheaded it. And I asked her, why did he get into that? Why is he specifically focused on that disease? It's very rare and he isn't affected personally. And she said it was actually because he treated a patient, and the patient's son had this condition, and the son or the father, I can't remember, wrote a book of poetry about the experience, what it's like to have that disease. And the doctor read it and was so inspired to really empathize with that experience, and
Hmm.
it felt urgent to him all of a sudden to figure out why in the heck this was affecting people and what was the mechanism happening. And so
Wow.
that inspired me to say, art can really, even people who aren't affected directly by something, it can, increase the mirror neurons and inspire some
Yeah.
act, and to use their privilege to be an ally.
Yeah, I know that's something that we've talked a lot about at Emmy Action, like how, how to use the medium of the day, art and documentary and movies, because I think, even like in a book or in a movie, if you see someone with that experience of that illness, it provides validation to it and sort of like the it just lends credence to it within the culture. So I think all these things do add up to erasing some of the stigma and helping to educate people. So my last question for you is I was just wondering if you have any takeaways. It just seems like you've been on such an intense journey ever since getting ill with Lyme disease and developing myalgic encephalomyelitis. You've been able to, continue your passion as a musician, even though you've had to adapt, sometimes even just making music from your bed. Um, so yeah, I'm just sort of wondering, like, just kind of like taking stock, if there's just anything that you want to share about what it's been like and maybe what you've learned or any advice for people, you know, maybe not, specific advice, but just, yeah, kind of like stepping back.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad to be connected with ME Action. It was really a turning point, and I'm so thankful for the work that you all are doing. And I'm so thankful for everybody who worked so hard when I was too sick to really be involved, doing so much of the legwork of organizing people for Bedfest and putting that together online. So, first of all, thank you for everything that you're doing for the ME community and beyond. And it's really hard to measure the effects of your work while it's happening, but I do believe there will be a documentary made someday about the ME movement and ME Action, and Jen Brea and everyone will be known as key players in raising awareness and taking action. I think that is one of my main takeaways from this experience is that it is difficult to measure the effect of someone's advice or someone coming into your life until you have, retrospect. And I think that it's, it's always it's not always better, but I feel like more often than not, it's better to get outside of our boxes and connect the dots.
Hmm.
Erin Brockovich, she connected the dots. That was the missing link. There were a lot of people in their separate houses in California who were being poisoned by this company that was poisoning the water supply and trying to cover it up. And there was one little 9-year-old who's getting leukemia and one woman who has 15 miscarriages mysteriously, and someone who has her whole family has a chronic cough all of a sudden, and this family has cancer, and they all are being told by doctors in the separate doctors' offices that there's no connection and that
Hmm.
it's really them as individuals who just need to get their act together.
Hmm.
But instead of placing the blame on the individual, we can find people power by connecting the dots, finding the trends, and continuing to ask questions and say, you too, me too. And why? Why is this happening? And what can we do to avoid this happening to so many people if it's unwanted? So I'm inspired by people like Erin Brockovich. And then another person I'm inspired by is Erica Chenoweth, who is an awesome researcher from the University of Colorado, who found that nonviolent movements are twice as likely to succeed as violent uprisings.
Hmm.
And within nonviolent movements, if the 3.5% of the population is engaged in some way, then the nonviolent movement statistically does not fail to achieve its
Hmm.
goal.
So
So if
you don't need much of the population
exactly,
to ally with you in order to make change. That's very
yes,
interesting.
we don't have to get 70% of the country on our
Mm.
side. We are 3.5%. We have us and our families and those who love us. Like we have the numbers. If we can feel empowered to act in some way, whether that is just sharing your story through a song on YouTube or holding up a sign from your window, taking a photo and tweeting it out to the NIH ME leader, or the neurologist who we're trying to, what is his name? The neurology head at the NIH that we're
Oh,
targeting.
Dr. Korschetz, Dr. Walter Korschetz.
Course
Yeah.
tweeting to him with hashtag not enough, or actually being well enough to get in a wheelchair and get to a bullhorn and combine in person at an action, um, or just having a private one-on-one conversation with somebody who could have their mind opened all of those ways, but still being connected to the overall umbrella movement
Hmm.
of hashtag the Canary Collective or hashtag ME believe me.
Yeah.
When we unite and we don't focus on the things that separate us and our different diagnoses and the different solutions that we're finding, whether it's brain retraining or surgery or mold avoidance, like we can't get divided. We need to keep that 3.5%. And
Hmm.
I believe that we can change hearts and minds and we can combat bias in the doctor's offices. I'm very inspired by ACT UP, AIDS movement activists as well. And
Yeah.
I know we're facing a different context, very different context and different disease, but we can learn from these past achievements of people who didn't give up.
Well, thank you for that. That's so well said and very inspiring. I just want to thank you for everything you do, for putting yourself out there. I know it is really hard. I don't personally know, but I can imagine that it's really hard to sort of put out your own experience and to put your own face out there. And I think people really do appreciate that. So thank you for, continuing to share your music and your art and for your time today. And we will talk to you soon.
Thanks so much for your time, Adrian.
All right. Bye, Kaeley.
Bye.